I want to introduce for you exercise 6. We're now moving along. We're going further and further into this process, into human nature. I call exercise 6 the mountain perspective. And where I want you to begin is, once again, you're in a quiet space and you're going into your own mind. And I want you to think about something that happened to you, let's say around 2 months ago. Just pick an event that stands out in your memory that was a bit emotional, right? That bothered you or excited you or whatever it was. Something, it could be even a month ago, but something in the fairly recent past. And I want you to reflect how in the moment you felt very upset, very emotional, very churned up, very excited, or whatever the emotion was. It had a strong quality to it. And now, when you look back on it 2 months ago, it doesn't seem quite the same. It doesn't seem quite so strong, right? It still maybe bothers you. It still may be rankling you a little bit when you recall it, but it doesn't have that obsessive quality that it had in the moment. You're not thinking about it continually. In fact, you've kind of moved on. And the problem seems to have shrunk a little bit, okay? Literally shrunk. All right, now, the next step is think of something that happened to you 6 months ago, if you can remember that back that far. I'm sure you can. Something similar that happened that was quite emotional or upsetting to you. It could be 6 months, it could be a year, whatever is good for you. It has to be something that stands out, that had a powerful effect and that you remember. You will notice now, going further back in time, that the emotions that you felt in that moment are harder to recall, right? They seem a little distant. Sometimes they even seem like maybe it was almost somebody else who experienced it. You don't remember it as well. And of course, the emotions around them don't seem so important, right? They've kind of lost their value. If it was a fantasy, something you were very excited about, or some great project you were going to do, it doesn't seem so interesting anymore to you. Or if it's some thing at work that really bothered you, something somebody said, you've almost forgotten about it. And it's shrunk even more than that thing that happened 2 months ago. And you will notice that it has shrunk, that it is not as big as it was in that moment. It's even shrunk more than that memory that you've called up from 2 months ago. Now, go back further in time. Maybe you go back several years, 5 years, even 10 years, to something really, really emotional. Because if it's something that's far in the past, it's really going to stand out. It could be the breakup of a relationship. It could be being fired. It could be a rift with somebody, etc. Something at the time that seemed life-changing, something that deeply upset you, that kind of seemed to like, I'm never going to be the same again after that. Now, when you look back on it, even if it was something that was very, very emotional, even more than these other things we've discussed, you will notice that you remember it, of course, but the memory has faded and your memory isn't as accurate as it once was. You have like a different way of looking at it. And in fact, sometimes if you look back at something 10 years ago, you can almost laugh and go, wow, I got so upset at that. And it didn't really matter in the end. It wasn't such a big deal as I thought. That breaking up of the relationship, I'm over it, I'm on to something else. It was fine, it was a good thing. Even being fired from that lousy job, it was a good thing. Why was I so upset? It's kind of weird. It's almost like you're looking at another person, right? And you have this strange sense of perspective that is different than that amount of time passing. The perspective of that 2 months, the perspective in the 6 months, or a year, and the perspective in the 10 years, they're all very different. They all create a distancing effect from the emotional problem. The distancing effect is more and more and more. I now want to introduce the image of the mountain. I want you to think of time as a kind of mountain, right? And so when you're in the moment, in any event, you're almost like at the foot of a mountain. You have no perspective. You're looking up and you can't see anything around you. You don't see the layout of the land that you're in. you just can see what's right in front of you, and it's that mountain, right? That's how it's like to be in the moment. In that 2-month period, you've now climbed up maybe a tenth of that mountain, and you're able to now look around and see more of what's going on. The mountain doesn't seem so enormous. It looms very much, but it's not so big as it once appeared to you. And you have this altered perspective, and things look different. With more and more time, that perspective changes until you have a greater vista, of a greater expanse of what you can see, and things change, and you see more and more and more. You're seeing the reality of things. What you're seeing is perspective and priorities. So in the moment, you have no perspective. And as you climb that mountain with time, you have more perspective. You're actually being more realistic. You're realizing that that wasn't so important, that wasn't such a priority in the particular moment. And when you get to the top of the mountain, sometimes, and that happens in life, where you've completely overcome this issue that bothered you once, you're seeing everything around the world. You're seeing the 360-degree perspective about yourself, about who you are. You have a totally different sense of what really, really matters in your life. Okay? So hold on to that image for a moment. And now, what we want to do here with this exercise is, right now in the present, there is some issue that's bothering you. And inevitably, as a human being, there's something on your mind. Okay? It can seem relatively small, but it rankles you. It's something that had a kind of compulsive thought that takes a hold of you. It's something emotional, generally having to do with people and what you're not getting from people, but it could be a disappointment in yourself as well, right? Or it could be a very important decision that you're facing. Whatever it is, it has a strong emotional component to it. In the moment now, it has a certain perspective to you, which it seems important, it seems it has weight, and you're worried about it. I want you to try, and this is not easy, but it's very, very powerful, to imagine that you're looking at this event 2 months in the future, and to see that, in 2 months, I'm not going to feel this way. It's going to be different. And you know what that's like. It's not like this is any mystery, because you've been through it as we went through the process before. You know that in 2 months, it's going to have a much different feel to it. If you can, go up further into that mountain, go to a year from now, and look back at it with distance and almost like laugh at it, right? It's ridiculous why I'm getting so worried. It's absurd that I'm going to send that angry email. I don't need to call that person and vent my feelings, because in a year, I won't have those feelings. This will give you a sense of perspective and priorities of what really matters. Now, of course, the question will come up, well, maybe it is something that's important. Maybe it is something in a year that will be very important to me. That is true, and that happens. But when you go through this process, you will realize that. You will realize that, this relationship that's falling apart, it's going to be affecting me in a year, and it is very important to me, and maybe I need to repair it in something. I can't seem to get that same kind of perspective. It doesn't seem to be shrinking. Well, that's showing you this is something that is truly important, that is a priority in your life. But I swear to you, 90% of the time, I don't know what that number is, I just picked it out of nowhere, it will be this shrinking dynamic. It will seem less and less important to you, because what we fuss over in the present is generally not so important to us. The flip side of this is another way of thinking that's very subtle and very powerful, and I hope you can grasp the idea. Sometimes there are things that are small in the present that we're not paying attention to, and then 6 months later, they turn into some crisis. You can almost think of this in a health issue, like you have some kind of small health problem, your blood pressure, whatever. It doesn't seem so bad in the present, but in 6 months, if you don't pay attention to it, it could lead to a heart attack, it could lead to a stroke or whatever. Okay, well, there are things like that on a more micro level, dealing with decisions, with important things in your life. And if you go back to 6 months ago, you might find one of those issues that you didn't pay attention to that have now turned into a full-blown crisis in your life. right? And so it's a little bit harder because you now have to look and think of things. It's almost what I call negative thinking. You almost have to think of something that's small that you're not even paying attention to that could turn into a major crisis. A problem at work that you're not paying attention to, but that's on your radar, but you don't think is important. Game it out and see that it could possibly lead to some terrifying consequences if you don't pay attention to it. And go through that process of bringing that somewhat small affair in the present to the future and imagining how it could turn into something big. It's not to freak you out and make you worried and fearful. It's to see the potential dangers in the present that you're not dealing with. And going up on that mountain, you now see that small thing, that little pebble in your shoe, has turned into a major rock that you're going to trip over and break your neck on. And so this exercise is an exercise in warping your sense of time, and distorting the perspective you have in the present, which actually is the distortion, and gaining some perspective and clearing your mind and seeing what really matters, what's really important, what's really critical in life. It's an immensely relieving exercise. It will relieve you of so much of your anxiety, of so much of the needless emotional turmoil that's going on in your life. Thank you. That was exercise 6, the mountain perspective. And good luck with that.